Thank you, Didi, Rabbi Yoel Schoenfeld, for this hefty introduction. I think I've accomplished everything. I might as well go home. The evidence is the appreciation of the young Israel for opening their doors and bringing to the forefront always important issues that face the Jewish community. At the same time, also to thank all the Choshev Askonim who have been involved and worked so tirelessly to make this evening the success that it is. And again, bringing to the forefront the painful reality of child abuse in the Orthodox Jewish community. I have to tell you, truth to be told, I'm here in the Kehillah now marking, Bez Hashem, it's going to be 36 years of all the various shilas, literally there's hundreds of shilas. I don't believe, throughout the many years, we've had more than 4 or 5 shilas ever dealing with this particular issue. Our time now has changed to this particular issue, and the reason is quite simple, because the fact that people did not come forth and talk about this is not because it doesn't occur or didn't exist, or it just started to exist at this particular time. Simply there's communal shame and there's public embarrassment, and there's even sometimes embarrassment from facing one's Rav to talk about these particular issues. And therefore, the fact is, I can tell you, I recall an incident, I believe it was something like maybe 8 years ago, where I received a call from the local here in Kew Gardens Hills from a mikveh lady concerning a woman who basically had bruises all over her body. And when approaching this woman in privacy and questioning her, the woman denied totally any abuse. Rather, she claimed that the abuses were as a result of her falling down the stairs. Actually, truly, I have no way of knowing what happened, but something deep down told me that she was actually only protecting her husband. B'tzad Hasheni, I knew her husband. And knowing her husband, he was the sweetest person in the world. Person you'd like to be friendly with. Outgoing person, Me'ura ben Abrius. Good conversationalist. Yes, he was a Baal Chesed. But at the same time, as we already know by now, it doesn't mean anything. Many abusers. Some of the most highly respected people of society. Some of them might be presidents of shuls. Some are public leaders. And I can tell you, the fact is that these people outside of the home might be the greatest Baal Chesed, but when it comes at home, they are the greatest monsters either to their wives or to their children. Yes, a number of years ago I received a call from Muncie, and due to the technology of caller ID, I have a rule: never ask a person whose name who calls for a shayla. Respect his privacy unless the person either offers it or there's reason to follow up. My eyes could not fail to notice that the name. The woman raised the question about being seriously abused, and the only time that her husband was nice to her was when she was going to the mikveh. Turns out her husband was a Choshev Rav in Muncie. Choshev Rav in Muncie. Which clearly tells you domestic violence, child abuse, it's something that crosses all barriers. And therefore this conference and this gathering is very important to make parents aware and the community aware of how we have to protect our children. I think talking about the halachic issues, probably which is one of the most important issues, and that is always what comes up, is the question of Mesira. Mesira, in its generic term, in its simplest form of understanding, is something that's very, very serious, where it applies. Some of the harshest lishonos and terminologies of Chazal and Shulchan Aruch, mutar lahargoi, allowed to kill him, and so on and so forth, that we find regarding Mesira cannot be overstated where Mesira applies. About in the year 2005, I was asked to address at the Aguda convention, but that was for a group of doctors. That time they raised the question how to deal with child abuse in terms of responsibility for a doctor, where by law, in fact, the doctor who notices this legally has to report it. And he felt it was important to discuss it from the halachic aspect. What are the halachic guidelines regarding this issue? The truth is that as early, and maybe not early enough, but in the year 1991, the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Waldenberg, with the great Poskim, contemporary Poskim, in his Shal Tzitchuvas Tzitz Eliezer in Chelik Yutes, in Simenon Beis, was asked a very serious shaila by a very famous doctor, great Talmid Chacham, known as Dr. Abraham, well-known doctor who has written a lot of svarim, mechaber svarim, on medical ethics, considered to be a great authority on these issues, not simply as a doctor, as a medical expert, but also having first-hand knowledge in halacha, not from his own perspective of being a paisik, does not paskin himself, but being the fact that he was a doctor and a Talmid Chacham. He had access to all of the Gedolei Yisrael and all the various Gedolei HaPoskim, whose doors were always open to him, and he had access, and many of the shilas and answers to serious questions, the answers to those questions that we have today, is no less due to the commitment to these issues and to these questions raised, in fact, by Dr. Abraham. The question that he raised was concerning about a Yeled HaMukah. Question number 1. Where a child that was battered, and he already writes, L'davayni, he says, Ein hadover nadir, it is not something that is rare. I wish, he says, it would have been rare, but it's not rare. Shemivim tinoik yeled lebeitz acholim, a child is brought into the emergency room. He says, Kishu kulai petzua kosha im shivarim begulgoilis. Child has been severely beaten, severely injured. His skull is fractured. And he goes on to say, Dimumim be'evarim pnimian. There's internal bleeding from severe beatings and burns. Burns from scalding water or cigarette butts. By whom? By the parents. By the parents. Sometimes one of the parents or both parents. And we know what happens. When you go and report them to the authorities, two things might happen. One thing is, of course, the parents will be prosecuted. And as a result, depending on the system, parents can wind up in jail. And many times they will wind up in jail. Number 2, the thing that's going to happen is they're going to remove the child from the home. And they're going to either they're going to place the child in a foster home or into a state institution, which very well may not be frum. So the child was raised, taking out of the child from a frum, yes, environment. He may not live, but it'd be a frum environment. And put him into a state institution. So the question is, as Tzitz Eliezer was asked by Dr. Abraham, is it mutter to hand over a yid to report? He says, is the doctor permitted, or the healthcare professional, allowed to report the parent to the police, knowing full well that the parents might and are going to wind up in jail? Is the doctor a moiser? Interesting. And in order to buttress the point of Mesira, so Dr. Abraham very well is knowledgeable, and he quotes why he's asking the Shaila, because he's very well aware about what Mesira might mean. So of course he quotes the Lashon, which, by the way, if you hear this Lashon Shulchan Aruch, you may stop and think for a moment until you really know what it means. But the Shulchan Aruch simply seems to be saying, that it's also limso liyisrael biadakum, it is also to hand over a Jew in the hands of authorities, Goyish authorities, ben begufay ben b'mamoinoi, afilu hu rosha balaveris. On the surface, as we learn this halach, it seems that we're sensitive to Mesira, even someone who's a rosha balaveris. Not only that, maybe he's a rosha at home is one thing. Va'afilu hu meitzar loy metzaroi. He's causing you grief. Shulchan Aruch seems to say, there still is an issue of Mesira. So is not the Shulchan Aruch therefore saying, asks Dr. Abraham, that may not the Shulchan Aruch be implying that it would be usher therefore to report parents who are abusing child, physical abuse, sexual abuse, doesn't make a difference. Abusing. But even before he waits for the answer, Dr. Abraham himself almost answers this question, and as you, I'm sure, suspect and certainly hope that in this situation it's clear that the doctor, he says, or the healthcare professional can indeed report the parents to the police, even if they wind up in jail, because the parents are considered to be a raidef, a pursuer. When you observe how someone is raidef achar, you're seeing someone pursuing someone else to kill him, or there's chances he's going to kill him, there's a din you're allowed in order to prevent the raidef, them carrying out his actions, even to kill the raidef, if there's no other way. Allowing the child to remain at home under these conditions, which means chances are the parents are just going to do it over and over again, this would clearly be a shayla pekuach nefesh. And certainly if it's a shayla pekuach nefesh, there would not be any question of a heter to do so. As Rav Waldenberg in fact says, Allah should not only allowed to do so, v'chayiv harayfei lasoy zois. The doctor is mechuyev to do that, to report him to the authorities, k'dei lahatzil nefesh achas mi-Yisrael mered shachas. So that's poshut. However, as we stand here, there is the area where the shayla is more complex. And that was the other part of the shayla that Dr. Abraham poses to the Tzitz Eliezer. Let's say it's not pekuach nefesh. Let's say that the child was abused by the parents, physically abused. However, we know he's not going to die. He's not going to die, but he's going to be abused. And the question is, can you go ahead and report the parents under those circumstances? It's not a question of pekuach nefesh. The child is being abused, though. Tzitz Eliezer responds and says that even under such circumstances, where it is not a question of pekuach nefesh, it is mutter, report the parents to the police, even though it's not a shayla of pekuach nefesh. And it's very interesting on what he bases that. There seems to be a contradictory psak. We just mentioned a moment ago that even if someone is mitzar you, even if someone is causing you grief, tsar, pain, Shulchan Aruch says that the Irs of Mesira applies. Yet, look at the Ramah. The Ramah writes in Siv Zayin, Yei shoymrim, the Odam hamuke mechaveiroi, someone who is being hurt by a neighbor, yochol he's allowed to go likvoy lifnei akum, he's allowed to go to complain, afal pi shegoyrim lemake hezegodl. The Ramah writes in no uncertain terms, if you don't, let's say, get along with your neighbor, every day you go outside, you meet him, he slugs you. He slugs you. There's no halacha you have to be a makabel bahava, those kind of yisurim. So the Moshe says that you are permitted. You're permitted to go ahead and report him. Afal pi again. Afal pi shegoyrim lemake hezegodl, the perpetrator will be severely punished. There's no problem. So how do you reconcile these two seifim? On the one hand, we have a din, it says, even if he's made tsar lo yimatzaroi, he's causing you grief, it says also limser, you're not allowed to. And yet the Ramah says it is permitted. And the answer is quite simply, he says comes the shach, and the shach says very few short words. And the shach says the chiluk is poshit, and this is very important to bear in mind. The shach says, when the tachlis of the Mesira is gufa, to stop the makois, to stop the abuse, that's not called Mesira. When the Shulchan Aruch says that it is also to report someone to the authorities, according to the shach, that's referring to a situation where a person caused you grief in the past and you want to get even with him. So what's the best way to get even? I'll report him. So go ahead. That is what the Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to do. But when the Mesira, the reporting to the authorities, is going to stop the makos, going to stop the beatings, then avada you're allowed to do it. In other words, that's basic self-defense. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, so we see that where the tachlis of the Mesira is in order to prevent and to stop abuse, he says, then the din of Mesira doesn't apply. And therefore he concludes that not only when a child is being abused, and it's the shayla of pekuach nefesh, as we mentioned before, avad is permitted to go to the authorities, but even if a situation where it's not going to put the child in a life-threatening situation, merely physical abuse, according to the Ramah, the tachlis of the Mesira is to stop and to prevent the abuse from continuing, then to stop him in his tracks when it's permitted to do so. Based upon this Ramah and the Shach, so again, the Tzitz Eliezer permits it. Dr. Abraham asked them the second question. The second question was not physical abuse, but it was sexual abuse. By whom? After what you heard before, you should not be surprised. B'mikre sheha'aba ba al bitoy haktano. Whereas the father is abusing his young daughter. Pa'omim chayzrois, many times over again. It's not a question of pikuach nefesh. Ma hadin, he says, Dr. Abraham asked, what would be the din in this situation? And then he goes on further. Let's say it's not a parent in your own home. What about a teacher, a kindergarten teacher? Yesh mikrim yeduim, he says, shel hisalalus, which means abuse. Shel moira began yelodim. Could be in the kavos, he says, ischarim. Girls' play group, boys' play group. In all of these cases, asking, do we have the shaila? Do we have a question? Is it permitted to report it? And the Tzitz Eliezer says, based upon I just told you a moment ago, that if the tachlis of the Mesira is not to get even, not stamp to punish, but if the purpose of the Mesira is in order to stop the perpetrator in his tracks, then it is permitted to report him. That certainly in these cases that you also have asked, the same halacha would apply. In Avad, if you're dealing in the situation of a kindergarten teacher, where he is accessible and is involved with children all the time. He's involved with children. Children are under his care. And being the authority that he has over the children trust him. There's the innocence of those children. They are at the mercy of that teacher. There's no question that in order to stop him, he says you're allowed to do it. This is the opinion of the Tzitz Eliezer. Besides the fact, which I mentioned just as an aside, no one should go further to take this as a halacha l'maisa, but the Tzitz Eliezer uses this only as a sniff, as an added. He doesn't need any more for the heter to report abuse in such instances. But just as an added heter, as a sniff, he quotes in Aruch HaShulchan. And the reason I'm saying this as an added sniff, because Aruch HaShulchan is a controversial Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan says something very phenomenal, and it's a tremendous chiddush. Shulchan says, and I'll quote to you, basically he says that the whole concept of Mesira, and again, nobody takes this halacha l'maisa, but the Aruch HaShulchan does write this. Tzitz Eliezer brings it only as an added sniff. But the Aruch HaShulchan writes, there's a difference, he says, between primitive and enlightened governments, he says, which means to say that basically if you follow the sources, says the Aruch HaShulchan, in the Gemara dealing with Mesira, is dealing with barbaric systems. You're dealing with governments that really is not a government of justice, governments that don't have a system of law, governments that punish in a measure that has no shaykhs to fit the crime. They do things at women that they have no real system. It's according to the Achzarius, who happens to be sitting and adjudicating the case at that particular time. He calls them bandits, he calls them pirates. He says, those are not people of authority. But he points out, but our system, interesting is our system, he lived under the Tsar, and he says, our system. Our system is fine. Or the system, he says, in Britain, he quotes, okay. He says, those systems, he says, I believe this is not the case that the Shulchan Aruch talks about. As we know, he says, like cases in Africa. That's where the problem is. Africa, he says, Mesira would be a problem. So they might, who knows what they do with him? Eat him up. So, Mamela, this is a distinction that the Aruch HaShulchan makes. Just want to mention that in the Tshuvas, if you go to various periodicals, go look in the Kovetz Tchumen, one of the popular periodicals, you'll find those that feel sort of skeptical even if the Aruch HaShulchan meant it himself. Because according to him, you can throw out a great section of Mesira today. Because you're living, let's hope, in a government such as in America, where you have governments of justice, maybe the whole need of Mesira doesn't apply, according to the Aruch HaShulchan. And the skeptical perception is that maybe the Aruch HaShulchan did this under the force of the censor. Which, by the way, many times there are areas in the Aruch HaShulchan where things were written partially because of fear of the censor, so therefore he writes even under the regime of the Tsar that this is a just government, and so on and so forth. Maybe that was the reason that he wrote it, but really he didn't believe it. By the way, there's an article of Rabbi Bleich about it in Techumen, there's also Rabbi Shol Yisraeli, and so on, and others as well. But they try to dismiss, they say, one thing is clear, the Tzitz Eliezer seems to take it quite seriously, even though he used it as an added sniff, but nevertheless he does not bring the point. He says, I don't believe he did it just because of the censor. Why? Because he did not only talk about Russia, where he was living in, he also mentions Britain, mentions other countries, which is no need for the sake of the censor. They don't care about those other places. It would have been enough merely to justify the place that he's living in. The fact that he added more different countries for the same heter would imply that he was not simply writing it out of fear of the censor. Another thing is, usually when he writes things for fear of the censor, he writes it in more smaller print. Here it's part of the actual sif. If you follow the Aruch HaShulchan, one sif after the other, and then he mentions this in bold letters as he would write anything else. Also, when he writes things for the sake of the censor, it doesn't bother to elaborate too many svaras. Why? He writes it. This is the way it is. Here he gives the reasons, gives you some logical explanation, which appears that this is the way that he is leaning. In any case, as an added sniff, the Tzitz Eliezer does rely also on the Aruch HaShulchan in order to be allowed to report predators, and mainly because of the Ramah, in order to stop abuse from happening. What's interesting to mention, if we didn't mention Aruch HaShulchan, let me tell you, Rabbi Moshe disagrees totally. Actually, in 3 different places in the Igros Moshe, that Mesira applies by the American government too, where it applies. Also, Rav Reish in Shas HaTshuvas Chalkas Yaakov also clearly states, he's even a little more machmer than Rav Moshe, not getting into that now, that Mesira does apply even in just governments. But Al Kaponim, it's good to know the Aruch HaShulchan's opinion, as it were. But there's one more thing that the Tzitz Eliezer advances. And he brings a tremendous chiddush from a Tshuvas Mabit. And from the Mabit was someone who lived in the time of the Bis Yosef. You're going back to the 1500s, about 4 centuries ago. And the Mabit tells the following thing, that where you're dealing with a problem, listen to this Mabit, very crucial. Where you're dealing with a problem, where a Jewish Bezdin cannot enforce or deal with the situation at hand. For instance, if a Jewish Bezdin has a question of physical or sexual abuse on its hand, and they are very limited in what they can do, writes the Mabit, and the Tzitz Eliezer quotes it in his own lashon, Hine tzayrach hashah, sometimes is the calling of the moment. Ubishuz Bezdin, if you have Rishuz Bezdin, yesh mokem lahater limsoyer, he said, because she'ein efsherus lavatzei azois b'Yisrael. Being we, as a Jewish Bezdin, we have no way of dealing with it. We have no way of enforcing it. It's a new insight of the Mabit, where, as the Tzitz Eliezer adds, it might be a typical case where Al Pidin Mesira might apply. But being it's a problem where the Jewish Bezdin cannot deal with it. We cannot enforce it. So here we have a problem, but there's no way to deal with it. And there's no way to deal with it. It is possible, says the Mabit, that B'Rishus Bezdin, that Bezdin has a koyach to revoke and to remove the Isser of Mesira because of Tzayrach HaShoah. Bezdin says, we have here a problem. This problem has to be dealt with. We have to deal with it. So Bezdin, even if legally the Din of Mesira normally would apply, but because of a problem that we have no other way of taking care of it, no other solution, we have no other power, Bezdin, therefore, can enforce and say, you know what? We are matter, the Isser of Mesira. Tshuvas Mabit. And the Tzitz Eliezer also uses that as an extra sniff regarding child abuse, physical abuse, as a heter to report it, B'Shuz Bezdin, as he points out. I want to tell you that this is not just the opinion of the Tzitz Eliezer. As a matter of fact, I want to quote you in the name of both the Rabbi Yashiv and also of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It's fair to say that Dr. Abraham considers himself to be a Talmud of Shlomo Zalman. In his writings, when he refers to him, he says, Moiri V'Rabbi. Was equally very, very close to Rabbi Yashiv. I'm not sure that he considers himself a Talmud. Rabbi Yashiv basically was, even though he gives shiurim, everybody knows, and it's a very big opportunity. If you ever in Eretz Yisrael, that's really a moment to see him up close when he gives his daily daf shir, not daf yomi shir, but his daily blatt shir, which a lot of those chedushim have been reprinted in a sefer called Ha'oris, on different mesechtas already have been put together. And people, if you're lucky, you have an opportunity very quickly to squeeze in after the shir, stick out your hand and get a bracha. But Kapadim, that's an opportunity. You can see him without any appointments. You just go in there and have an opportunity to see him for about an hour as he gives the shir. Kenar at this age, Hashem Yarach Yom Vishnoisef, he continues to give the shir. Rabbi Yashiv and both of Shlomo Zalman say the following. They say, a child or infant that's brought to a hospital with symptoms of being a battered child, it is prohibited after an investigation to return him to his home, as they will continue to beat him until he might die. Okay, that is, as we said, the Pikuach Nefesh case. It's obligatory. Then they go further about the problem that they might place him in a non-Jewish home. Certainly this Pekuach Nefesh, both the Tzitz Eliezer and all of them agree that would be secondary. You have to worry about his life and to save the child's life. And we are not going to worry what might ensue down the road, where they might place him. And he goes on further. It's important, he says. Particularly, he says, you're dealing in areas with these things that are prevalent. He says, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach agreed with all of the above, and also Rabbi Yashiv, he says, Paskin, that is permitted for a doctor to inform the authorities, even if it's possible that the child will be placed with a family or agency that is not Jewish. A number of years ago, as you see that the Shaila was coming up, although it is not to the forefront as we are seeing now in our time, Tafshin Ayin Aleph, but in a particular kovetz, it's a very popular kovetz called Kovetz Yeshurun. Very sophisticated type of a kovetz, very choshev a kovetz periodical. There's a tshuva by Rabbi Noach Halberstam. Zechron Levrocha. Moshe Halberstam was a chaver of the Badatz of the Eid HaChreidis Yerushalayim. A very, very well-known posek. Besides, he was a person with a heart, with a tremendous leiv, tremendous sensitivity. His door would be open to everybody. You can imagine he was a person, on the one hand, being a member of the Badatz Eid HaChreidis, was supposed to be, the great Kenoim. Many times when I come into his house, I would see there people with Kippas Rugan, all types, all walks of life. He would spend with them all of his time. People living the Shtachim, living all over. Did not make a difference to them. It's not just he would just pask in the Shaila and then close the door, but he would really sit with them, make contact, try to help them in certain situations. As a matter of fact, he even gave one of them my phone number. Wasn't so happy about that. He did that also. So this was the follow-up. This is the derech. This was Rav Moshe Halberstam, if you knew him. At the end, he writes that his tshuva was asked the Shaila about, is there a question of Mesira? Al Kolponim, he says, B'cho nachsina and b'ho maskina, we end. He says, Shamizdareis limnoya. The quicker you do it, he says. Shamizdareis limnoya maho'av mibnei mishpocha, he says. Melachtoi, b'chol oif mishimtzel l'nochoim, should do it. V'af l'moisroi l'shiltoinos. Not only, he says, is it okay, but to be mizdareis. Don't delay, do it as quickly as possible. But he adds, you have to have seichel. Sometimes we jump, quick. You have to really see what's happening. Assess the situation properly. Don't misread what's happening. It's an achrayis, to know what's happening. Don't overlook what's happening. But see what's happening, look at it intelligently, and deal with it, as he says. Beheske v'das. Also, B'zalman Nechem Goldberg wrote a tshuva, particularly on this shaila. Seems, and b'mechilas maybe I should say, maybe it was a little bit naive. Maybe naive. He gives a heter reporting, but he says at the end, but be careful. Why? Why? You're going lahaziroi be'iyum, maybe to threaten him shimsam lamalchus. Well, what you've heard today, you see that's not true. It's a helpnish to threaten him, and it doesn't help to scare him. Can't blame Reb Zalman Nechemya. That's it. And part of the reason, I'll tell you, part of the reason why this issue, it's not so much we're afraid about the dirty word or anything like that. Part of the reason is also because I think deep down nobody really believed or really knew how far serious this is. Nobody really knew that this is something that cannot be helped. It's a problem. Nobody looked at it as an illness. You say he's a pervert. If it's a pervert, maybe you can deal with it somehow. But if you look at it as an illness, then it's totally something different. It's totally different parasha. So it was a really lack of knowledge. And I have to tell you that at the end of the day, that when we say that it is the consensus that's permitted to report and there's no Isra Mesira, however, there cannot be Hefkeris either. And therefore, the way it is taken out from many tshuvas is, a shaila should be asked from a Rav, and I have to say this, a Rav who is sensitive to these ideas and has some knowledge with this thing. There are great Rabbonim out there, Chosher Rabbonim, great Talmidei Chachamim. When it comes to this area, they are not familiar, they are not aware, and therefore they may misplace the halach in the wrong direction. And many have said, if you go to a Rav who clearly did not understand the issue, then find another Rav. It's not like any other shaila, you don't go shopping for a heter. The situation, you go to a Rav and he was machmer, you have to accept the psak. He doesn't go, okay, let me try, I have a few phone numbers here, let's see which one I like best. You don't go like that. Halacha doesn't go like that. When it comes to this halacha, this is the opinion of many Gedolei Yisrael. You went to a Rav and he said to you, you can't report him. Maybe he's right in a particular situation. Maybe. It's not so poshut. Then go to another Rav. Go to another Rav who will understand the situation better and in fact will give you a heter. And I have to tell you just recently, I think it was about a month ago, I received a phone call from a doctor in Borough Park. From doctor, belonging to the Boston Chassidus, happened to be a female doctor. Runs her own office. She asked the Shaila. It's an amazing thing. Child abuse, what? 5 years old, 6 years old, 7? A mother was abusing the child. Physical child abuse. Teenager, 13 years old, 14 years old. As the children were growing up, each one, after they married, had scars from the abuse from the mother. Mother was totally controlling of the child. Child put food in her mouth. Teenager, without permission of the mother, she would rip it out of their mouths. There were bruises here and there. Not terrible bruises, but the emotional scars of having to live. There's a chasna coming up in the family. Mother says a punishment, you're not going to get a dress for the chasna. Child growing up, these are tremendous types of abuses, and so on and so forth. The mother, people who know her, is a wonderful woman. Because since then, someone else was familiar with the case, mentioned it. Whoever knows her, be best friends with her. Nobody will have an inkling that that's what's going through at home. And now I know this child in Brooklyn, Borough Park, as a matter of fact, a family member in our family, who might be taking in one of the children, one of the teenagers, out of this particular home. It's not going to end up in some fry place or some hefkerige place, but in a from home. So this is what we're dealing with. And hopefully again, that this is brought to our awareness and brought to our attention. So I simply conclude. Every Yid says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So you put your hands over your eyes. And you shry Shema Yisrael. And maybe you're saying with such kavanah, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You're saying, Rabbi Noach, I believe you're the only one. You may not be such a believer. You know why? Because there's a prerequisite. Shema Yisrael. Are you able to hear the pain of another Yid? First comes Shema Yisrael. Hear the tsar and the pain of another Yid. After that you can say, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. If you're not ready for the Shema Yisrael, for the opening part of that posuk, if you're not sensitive to hearing the pain and the tsar and the outcry of the Yiddish neshama, the pain and the feeling of the tsar, then you make shry Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad does not have real meaning. The Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad has only as much meaning as to the sensitivity of the Shema Yisrael. Where Hashem, this tremendous demonstration of people coming out. I mentioned to someone, I think many here are already those whose children are long married, so it's not really something that they may not even be dealing with personally, but people have come out from all ages. All grandparents have grandchildren, hopefully. Welcome upon them. It's tremendous, as I say, it's the Kiddush Shem Shemayim, and this awareness, Bez Hashem, should help us that we should be able to continue to have a lot of Schusim and Shemayim. We should not have to have any more of this type of gatherings. Next gathering should be a Bez Hashem for Simchas, Chos and Kalep, Pinyin Abens, Bar Mitzvahs, Shalom Zochar. Bez Hashem should be Zoichet to see Bonim when they Bonim. Oizkim B'Torah Mitzvah, Adoyim Adbiyaz, B'Yil Tzevim, Amen.